Though I don't have ACES, I really want to paint this Jade Falcon Epsilon Galaxy this week. So we're going to do that. We're going to go over using the sponge, kind of like a beginner method. Then we're going to jump into a little bit more advanced with some glazing and some other oils. So without further ado, let's jump into this. Now to start off, I'm going to base the mech with black, and I'm going to use the sponge to start building up the first base color, which is with scale 75 dark forest green. And I really like this paint. Two reasons: it looks nice, secondly it always gives this really nice matte finish. You can base a model using the sponge, but you need to cut off a piece of sponge to get all those small crevices with a sponge like this, and it works perfect. For the green, I'm going to use this Warpaint's Fanatic Emerald Forest, Leafy Green, and then Rainforest. Really liking this triad style paints, and I like the kind of simplicity being able to choose these paints. I did it with the reds, and now I figured why not with the greens. So I'm going to cover about 80% of the model with the first Emerald Forest green, and it's going to take a bit of a time to cover it up, but I really want to cover up as much as I can while leaving the shadows on the bottom part of the mech. And if I haven't mentioned it, make sure that the sponge is wet, because when you're using this kind of a sponge, you want to make sure it has some dampness to it. And I went back to that little small cut piece of sponge just to help get in the cracks and create recesses, because this Blood Asp has those two kind of recesses right there in between the guns, and I really want to hit those. Okay, this is it. So I got about 80% covered while leaving the dark forest green underneath. Now I'm going to jump into leafy green. Now I'm aiming to do at least maybe 60% of the model covering, because I still want to leave the previous two colors visible. And using the sponge, you can blend it pretty well where you never see that harsh kind of contrast between two layers, as if you were doing kind of a layering technique. And this is kind of why I highly suggest trying the sponge technique if you're a beginner, because you can really create cool effects with very minimal skill. It's really fun to do this style of painting because you can build up some pretty cool colors. Now I have the rainforest green, and now I'm aiming to do maybe 20%, and I'm only doing these just on the main parts of the armor. I was thinking about the light source coming from up top, so just trying to hit just those parts that I would assume that the light would hit. And this rainforest green really is a very bright lime green. It's cool, but if you're not into lime green, you could opt out, but I really like the color of it because I feel like it really stands out. So here it is. After those three colors, you can see the gradient building up from dark to light. Now, the Epsilon Galaxy has black panels. It took me a bit to choose which ones I wanted to be black. Sometimes you have to do this. You have to take time to kind of choose. Now, when covering the black on this, I'm trying to be very careful, because if I were to hit some of the green, I would have to cover up. But nonetheless, if you did that, you could just clean it up with some of the rainforest green if you did. Next, I'm going to use Iron Hand Steel, and I promise I'm going to try a new metallic soon. I'm going to be grabbing some of the Vallejo metals. I've heard really good things about those, so be checking that out. And I'm just picking out some of the small metal details. I have the barrels, I have the back heat sinks, and those little metal things underneath the gun. They look kind of like these like hinges or something. So I'm trying to hit all those and be careful, make sure nothing is going to hit the greens. Okay, we have the metals done right now. Let's wash them with Nolan oil. Now, when I use Nolan oil, I use a little bit on the paintbrush and I consistently go back and forth to the pot. I do this mainly so I don't have the temptation to overload, and it gives me the chance just to kind of do, it's not pin washing, but it's careful washing. Now, I want to start highlighting. So you could, if you didn't want to highlight edge highlighting, you could dry brush this and just barely hit the edges on the corners. If you want to try edge highlighting, use Rainforest and just use the side of the brush to hit the edges of the armor panels. Don't worry about trying to hit every single panel. I don't feel like these things would project light on every single panel. Just hit the ones that you would assume would be hit by the light source. And just kind of use a judgment call. I don't like highlighting every single inch of every single side of the model. I feel like it looks kind of cartoony and not real, but that's just me. And also, I often like to take this where you just do some scratches. If you make a mistake, you can do these little scratches, as you saw I did a few. Next, I'm going to add off-white to the Rainforest just to build up that second highlight. And I will just hit very minimal quarters with this. I don't want to overdo it because you don't want to really kind of push that contrast too bright, but just being careful and just using the side of the brush on the edges. And if you're afraid of doing edge highlights, do it this method because you avoid these swiggly lines if you're doing with the tip of the brush, and it helps me a lot, and I assume it could help other people if you learn to do it with the side of the brush. Next, to highlight the silvers, I'm going to use Runefang Steel from Citadel and just pick out the small details on the edges. Again, I'm using the side of the brush to do a lot of these edge highlights and just picking out the smallest details on these. Next, I'm going to start highlighting these blacks, and I'm going to use coal black, but a substitute would be dark sea blue from Model Color Vallejo. And I'm just going to be careful and hit all the edges here of the blacks so I can build the first highlights. And if you wanted, you could dry brush this. If you're more into dry brushing, just be very careful. And I would use a very small dry brush and hit them, but I think the edge highlighting looks a little bit better in this case and you have more control. Next, I'm going to use Thunderhawk Blue, which is my favorite color from Citadel. And I'm now going to use the side of the brush just to hit the very small edges of the blacks because I want to build up that first highlight and then the second layer, which is the Thunderhawk Blue. And I really like this color. I want to use it more often. I want to find a mech color scheme that uses just the Thunderhawk Blue. That would be amazing. If you know of any, let me know because I love this color. Now, I would typically not do this, but I'm just showing you if you wanted to finish your mech, you could just cover the cockpit with white, then you could glaze maybe a blue or something over it, use a contrast paint over it, just for the sake of it for this beginner level. I think this looks amazing. If you were to paint your Epsilon Galaxy BattleTech ACES model as this would be rocking on the battlefield. Just using what was just done, it looks pretty darn cool. but we're gonna glaze. So if you want to go one step farther, I'm gonna use molten lava mixed with this leather brown, and I'm just gonna glaze some of the recesses where that dark forest green was. And I don't want to overdo it too much, but I think it looks really cool because it makes the green pop out. In glazing, you get the base color decently watered down, and then you take off a lot of the paint, and then you're just tinting the bottom part of the paint. Now you could not use this, but I'm going to use that old rust from AK and just put it in the recesses just to build up a little bit more of that orangey tone. And you could use a bit of an orangey brown oil wash for this. This is all I had on hand. I really like this old rust, and it tends to look pretty cool. And while this was wet, I went ahead and just started doing the cleanup because I didn't want too much on it. I wanted it just in the recesses. So as you notice the end result, you can see just a little bit of this rust red in the recesses. And if I haven't mentioned, you clean up this kind of oil-based paint with white spirits, and you can use the makeup sponge for cleanup very easily. Now, I want to use this sponge for chipping because it should work really good on this model. Yeah, I just spilled my whole water bottle of my paint water everywhere. I cleaned it up though, killing me. I'm gonna chip with the black first with the sponge, and if you're looking for a sponge like this, you can easily get this. This is literally a packing sponge from some model I bought a long time ago. I had these those kind of had the bumps on them for keeping things safe inside. Don't spend the 12, the 15 euros that places like Army Painter want to charge you. Use your own. You can make use of any kind of packing material. Then I took some of the white also mixed with the rainforest to build up the next layer of the sponging. So for the cockpit, I'm going to first cover up the white, and granted, maybe I shouldn't have done the white, but I wanted to show the visual how it could look. And going to mix then the violet with the green stuffed world brighter, I forgot the name of it, the phantom violet, and I'm going to hit the edges of the bottom right corner of the cockpit glass here. Now I'm mixing black with that original violet and glazing it on the top left. I've been doing this a lot, and I feel like it looks pretty cool for that shadowing effect. I'm going to mix the ice yellow with the phantom violet from Green Stuffed World, and now hit just one line on that bottom right corner of the cockpit glass. And finally, going to use just the ice yellow on the farthest corner of the panel. And I've been using the same brush. Don't overbuy every single brush. You can make use of the brushes you have. I literally use 3 brushes to paint these models. And this is the final result. I always say I'm super stoked how these things turn out, but using the makeup sponge has changed my perspective how I paint miniatures, and it really works well for these BattleTech miniatures because you can create those great shadows. So thank you for watching this week's video. Next week, going to hop right back into the legendary mech warriors, and starting with a tank actually. So I'm super excited to get into that. A tank, which we forget this universe has tanks as well. So thank you. Have a fantastic week.